Whenever we work with Excel, we should ask ourselves this one question. Can we turn this into a zero-click dream? This is where we complete the entire task with 0 clicks, and that's what we're going to build in this video. We've got a schedule that lists contracts and when they expire. What we want is to send a weekly report to ourselves if there are any contracts which expire in the next 30 days. Therefore, we know that we need to take action. And this will all run in the background with 0 clicks. So if you're ready, let's get started. Here we have our workbook saved in SharePoint, and we are going to click on the 3 dots and select Open in App. That now launches Excel with our report. On the left, you can see the list of contracts. We're going to start by creating a filter which lists the contracts expiring 30 days from a given date. In cell F10, I'll type equals filter, opening bracket. We want to use the entire table, and we want to include the rows from that table where the expiry date is less than or equal to the value in cell G4 plus 30 days. If there are no contracts in that time period, we want to return a default value. For that, we're going to enter an opening curly bracket, and then in double quotes, we're going to enter the word none in square brackets. For the next value, we want an empty text string, and then another empty text string. I'll close the curly bracket at the end, then we can close the filter and commit that function. That now returns none because we don't have a date in cell G4. Let's add a date in there, and I'm going to enter the 7th of August 2025. That now displays the list of contracts which expire within 30 days of that date. If the date were different, such as the 20th of July 2025, that would display a different list of contracts. For our scenario, we want to use the today function in this cell. So I'll enter equals today, opening bracket, closing bracket, so that will always give us today's date. Next, let's add some headings to the result of our filter. We're going to edit the formula in cell F10. At the start, we're going to enter VStack, opening bracket. Our first array is going to be our header names from the table. And then the second array will be the result of the filter function. I can then close the bracket at the end and commit that formula. Let's make the first row bold, and also let's add a bottom border. Finally, we want to create a switch which will determine if we do or don't send the email update. In cell G5, we want to return 1 if we do want to send the update. In there, I'll type equals, opening bracket, and we are checking if cell F11 does not equal, in double quotes and square brackets, we want the word none, which is the value returned if the filter returns no rows. Currently, that will return true or false, but we want to return 1 or 0. So at the start, I will add minus minus, and now that returns 1 if we want to send the report, or 0 if we don't want to send the report. That completes the first stage of our process, which is setting up the workbook as we need it. For the second stage, we're going to write 3 Office scripts. The first script changes a cell value. The second script reads a cell value, and the third script gets an image from a range of cell values. In Excel, we will select the Automate tab, and in there we want to click New Script. This launches a pane on the right hand side. It's currently a little small, so let's expand that pane. Now let's write our first script, which changes a cell value. I'll click on the script name. Let's call this Change Cell Value. And then we're going to click on the arrow because we want to save this in SharePoint. I'll click on the SharePoint example site, and then I can click Save. Our script is now saved on SharePoint. we're now ready to write our script. I'm going to select all of the default code and delete it. The script we're going to write is workbook, which references the workbook, dot get worksheet, and in there we are going to use a placeholder name of WS name. We will come back to that name in a few moments' time. Then I'll enter a dot, and we want to use get range, and this is based on the placeholder name of RNG name. I'll enter a dot again, and finally we want to set value, and the value will be set based on another placeholder name called value. So we've created 3 placeholder names: WS name, RNG name, and value. We need to tell Excel that these are placeholders. After the workbook declaration at the start, we're going to enter WS name, which is a string. Next, we'll enter RNG name, which is also a string. And finally, we had value, which once again is a string. This first script is now complete, so I can click Save Script. That's our first script, and we need to carry out the same process for our other 2 scripts. But I'm not going to write out the code. Instead, we're just going to look at the final code for those scripts. The second script is called getCellValue. It uses the workbook, and then for the getWorksheet, we use WS name, and also for the getRange, we use the RNG name. In the previous example, we used setValue so that we could change the value of a cell. Here, we are using getValue so that we can get the value from a cell. The return keyword at the start means that this value will be returned by the program which runs the script. As before, we declared the WS name and the RNG name in the function declaration at the top. And we need to make sure that we save this script in the same SharePoint location. The third script is called createImage, and this is a little more complex. We use the workbook, then getWorksheet, and in there we are using the WS name. After that we have getRange, and in there we are using the RNG name. But this time, instead of getValue or setValue, we are using getImage, which will get an image of the range. And we've allocated this image to a variable called img. To send this image in an email, we need to ensure that it is in a HTML format. So in the next line, we create a variable called HTML, and it contains the code required to change this image into HTML code. The code here is always the same. We don't need to change that. The only thing that changes is that we inserted the img variable into the middle of this line of code. Finally, we use the return keyword to return the HTML code back to the application which called the script. As before, we declared the WS name and the RNG name in the function declaration at the top. And we need to make sure that we save this script in the same SharePoint location. And they are our 3 scripts. But before we go any further, let's make a mental note of some of the key pieces of information we need. The Worksheet tab is called Contracts. The date is in cell G4. The switch, which determines whether we send the report or not, is in cell G5. And the report that we want to send is in the spill range, which starts in cell F10. That completes the second stage. Next, we want to build the process that will run the scripts and send out the weekly email. For that, we're going to use Power Automate Online. Here we are in SharePoint, and we want to open Power Automate. To do that, we click on the waffle menu and select Power Automate. If that's not in your menu, you can go to the More Apps button. Power Automate will open in a new browser window, and we are going to click Create to build our flow. We are sending our report on a weekly basis. So for this, we want a scheduled Cloudflow. Let's give this the name of Contract Expiry Reminder. Then we set the start date of when this flow should start running. After that, we set how often this should run, and we want this to run every week. Now, we don't want it to run every day, so I'm going to uncheck all of those, and we just want to send it on Monday. Then I'll click Create. This creates our flow, and you can see the trigger at the start. If we click that, we can see the settings which have been applied, and in there we can change the settings for how often this flow runs. Let's start by calling our first script. I'll click on the plus icon to create a new step, and we are going to search for script. We want to run the script from our SharePoint library. That adds a new step. Let's set the values for that step. The workbook location is our SharePoint example site. The workbook library is the documents library. And then for the workbook itself, I'll click on the folder, and there we can see the only workbook we have is our contract expiry workbook. So that's the workbook we want to run the script on. Now let's find the script. The script location is our SharePoint example site. The script library is the documents library. And finally, let's click on the folder to find the script that we want. And we want the change cell value script. I'll press Tab to commit that. Power Automate will now recognize that we had three placeholders: WS name, RNG name, and value. The WS name should be contracts because that is the name of the worksheet in our workbook. The RNG name should be cell G4 because that is the cell that contained the date. And finally, for the value that we want to enter into G4, we're going to enter equals today, opening bracket, closing bracket. That will enter that formula into that cell and will trigger a recalculation. Let's now rename our step to Update Report. We're now ready to add our second script. I'll right-click on the previous step and select Copy Action. Then I'll right-click on the plus symbol and select Paste an Action. That adds a step which is identical to the previous step. So let's edit this step. I'm going to call it Check If Send Email. The workbook location doesn't change. The workbook library doesn't change. The workbook doesn't change. Also, the script location doesn't change and the script library doesn't change. But we do want to change the script. I'll click on the folder icon, and rather than change cell value, we want get cell value. Power Automate identifies that we have some placeholders for this script. For WS name, we want contracts, and for the RNG name, we want cell G5. That is the cell that contains our switch. So, having got the value that determines if we need to send the report or not, we now need to add some logic. I'll click on the plus icon to add a new step, and we are going to search for condition. Here we have that option, and I will select that. The condition we want is where the result from the check if send email is 1. In the first box, I'll click the lightning icon to get the dynamic content. In there, we want the result from the check if send email step. Now, there are various options for logic in here, and we want to check if the value is equal to, and the value we want it to be equal to is 1. That's the condition. And there we can see we now have a true or false path. If the result is false, we don't want to do anything. But if the result is true, we then want to send the report. So let's now get the image from our report. I'll right-click on the previous step and select Copy Action. Then, in the true side of the condition, I will right click on the plus icon and paste the action. That adds the action, and now we need to edit that action. I'm going to call it Get Image. All of the parameters are the same until we get to the script. I'll click on the folder and we want to use the Create Image script. Once again, Power Automate displays the placeholders. For WS name, we want contracts. For RNG name, we want the cell F10. But because we want the spill range for that cell, we need to enter the hash symbol. So that means it won't just get that one cell, but it will get all of the cells that are generated by that formula. Finally, I'll click the plus icon once more. We're going to search for Send Email. In there, we can see Send an Email, which is under the Outlook section. I'll click that. First, we declare who we want to send the email to. And in there, I'm going to enter my email address. Next, we have the subject. And for that, I'm going to provide contract expiry reminder. That's our email subject. After that, we have the email body. In there, I'm going to enter automated notification. I'm going to select that text and make it a header. After that, we will create a new line and enter the text contracts expiring within 30 days. We want to insert the image. So I'll click on the lightning bolt to get the dynamic content. In the Get Image step, we want to select the result, which was the HTML returned by the script. And that's it, we're done. I'll click Save to save our Power Automate flow. Our flow will now run each week, and if there are any contracts expiring within 30 days, it will send us an automated notification. But before we finish this video, let's test to make sure this works. So I'll click Test. We're going to test this manually, and then I'll click Test, then Run Flow, and finally I'll click Done. This now triggers our flow, and in just a few seconds, everything is done. So the ultimate test is, did we receive the email? Let's take a look in Outlook. Yes, we did. Here is the email. This is our automated notification, which includes the list of expiring contracts in the next 30 days. And this report will run automatically each week. That is the zero-click dream. We have an automated report that runs every week and tells us about significant events that we might need to take action on. Now, if you like the idea of automating your work further, then there's only one place you need to be, and that's inside our Excel Academy. In there, we have a course dedicated to Office scripts, but that's not all. We also have courses on Power Query, Power Pivot, dynamic arrays, and more. Plus, we also have add-ins, tools, templates, live masterclasses, and Q&A sessions. So head on over to exceloffthegrid.com and check it out. And once you've done that, why not watch this video next? I think it's another one you'll really enjoy. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.